And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring today's guest on. And three, two, one, bingo.
Hey,
Good, good evening.
good evening.
So I'd like to introduce Arjen, who is going to be joining us today and talking about, his very particular stack in this sort of like decision that he made to build a personal site for, I believe, a friend. But also, we're going to talk about this consultancy that you also have, which I'm really eager to hear about. So, that being said, once again, welcome.
Oh, thank
You're so welcome, man. And again, I want to thank you for taking the time because, like I said, I know you're in the Netherlands right now, so
you.
it is more or less dinner time. And I always feel bad whenever we have to schedule things around this time because I know people in Europe are like, "Hey, listen, this is dinner time. I have a
Mhm.
family," So I do appreciate you making this exception.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's fine. I'm used to this. That's
Awesome. So I'm going to do what I always do, which is, kind of like this proverbial handing over of the keys. But if you want to sort of take a few moments and introduce yourself, tell the people who you are, what you do, et cetera, and we'll go from there.
sure. Oh, I'm Arjen. Hi, PageSpeed consultant. I didn't shave. Henry did. I didn't. Um, yeah. What's to tell? I've been doing this for a very long time. I've doing PageSpeed consultancy for a very long time. I wake up every morning. I start doing PageSpeed. I go to bed, and I stop doing PageSpeed. And yeah, that's what I do most days.
And so you got into page speed,
Mhm,
performance consulting.
mhm.
Were you doing this always? Did you work somewhere else prior to that, or did you always work for yourself?
No, I used to be a psychologist a very long time ago. So I used to work at the university, and that was way back when we had to boot Windows from DOS. Right? We had to type you with the black screen, you had the Windows.x, and then you had to wait like 5 minutes to use Windows. So that's about the time the internet arrived.
Mm.
So we were thinking, so how can we make the internet work for us, for our students? Um, so uh, we built a website, an internet for the university, and we did a lot of research there. And because nobody knew anything, we had no idea what the internet was going to do. So we kind of researched, well, how can we help our students get better information by giving them more information. And we tested a lot of things, and one of the things we found was that page speed um, was already important. So I think I knew this about 30 years ago or so. Um, I always had a fascination with page speed, and that was when I started getting really interested in web. Um, Now then my girlfriend, my former girlfriend, asked me, "Hey, Arjen, can you build me a website?" It was a school thing, so I did. Um, well, I broke up with my girlfriend, but the catch what? A couple of years later, I met my wife. She got pregnant. She had a baby, and the day that she um, had to go back to work, she was like, "I don't want to go back to work," and I was like, "I don't either." So that was 20 years ago, um, and that website that I had built, I think there were about 5 million um, monthly visitors, which was a lot back then. So I quit my job. I started doing more website, and people started asking me, "Well, Arjen, can you help me?" I was like, "Sure, I'll help you." So I was one of the first SEO guys. Um, but then marketing took over. So those guys, they talk a lot better than me, and they sell a lot better than me. Um, and they convinced the world, that now it's not technology, it's content. You have to listen to us, content and link builder. And I was like, okay, you do your thing, and I'll get a little bit more technical. So I kind of, because I like that stuff, and I became more and more and more um, consultancy in the technical corner, um, and that's how I became to do a lot of Facebook.
So let me, give me 2 seconds here. Hold up. I was like, "Man, there's something wrong with my scene." And they're like, "Oh, my little light. I forgot to turn my light on. Let's go." So, let me get this right.
Sure.
Your background essentially was not working in, kind of like an agency or a tech firm or anything like that. You were basically an educator.
Yeah,
Amazing.
I still am most of the times.
Oh,
Because,
okay.
whenever I help people, I'm not sometimes I'm the guy who makes the changes. Uh, but I prefer, learning, giving the team the tools, making them understand. Uh, well, how do you have to look at this stuff? And how can you prepare and what do you have to know? And how can you oversee the complexities?
Mm, okay. Now, um, so again, this is very interesting. I love hearing about sort of like people's backgrounds and whatnot because essentially, you did not really go through the path of a classic, tech firm employment, and you happen to be sort of like exposed to, a particular area, and then you start to dive. You just
Yeah.
basically pick this on your own,
Mm.
which is great. Now, you sort of dabbled into it already, but I'll again ask formally.
Mhm.
If you had to decide on where you believed you started to really pay attention to performance. You know, you talked about, sort of like being around the SEO space, but
Mhm.
was there a particular blog post? Was there like a little video content that you saw? Was it maybe one day an experience that you had that, told you like, hey, I really do want to work in this performance space? Like, what would you say was that sort of turning point?
Well, it's two questions basically. So I've always believed that page speed is super important. I started with my own websites,
Mhm.
um, and I always said, well, it may not be a factor, but it's a catalyst. A slow website's not going to grow, or at least not as fast. Um, and I've always believed that. So I'm good at the technical stuff, so that's the stuff that I can do. So that's the stuff I did. I made very fast websites, and people liked them. They visited them, and that's how I came. That's how I came into contact with PageSpeed. When did I want to be a consultant? Well, that's I kind of rolled into that. I really like doing this stuff. It's uh, sometimes you will get into the most unlikely clients, and it's always so nice to see, well, what's your path? How did you get there? And especially, so that this is a bit less these days, but like 5, 6, 7 years ago, the people who were thinking about page speed, you know, were the ones that really uh, were a lot ahead of the other sites. So we had the biggest sites, um, and the most interesting people, and that's what I like about that. Um, just coming to a company and helping them, but also learning how they came to be.
Mm, absolutely. And so essentially, again, you seem to have had a sort of like classically different path outside of from the employment part, but also your discoveries almost seem to be baked into what it was like back then. So, getting back to what you had sort of touched on very early in our conversation, you've
Mhm.
been around the web for a little while, and you probably got to experience the web at its sort of like throttled, moments where like, hey, there's between like dial up, between like very very premature, bandwidth or
Oh
high
yeah.
speed back then. I don't know what it was called, but you do definitely remember like the early kind of like struggles of not having, good bandwidth, and
I'll tell you a story. I'll never forget.
please.
So um, I was doing I don't know the translation, but I was doing my school exam. I was like 17, um, and we had math. I thought I did it right. I did. But I wasn't sure. And then this one teacher, he did the test himself. He took a photograph and uploaded it into the web. And my father, No, he had like one of the first modems, a 28K8. I don't know how you call it.
Yeah.
And more people had the idea. Okay, we're going to download this picture, and I remember waiting for 4 hours to download it. 4 hours, one picture,
Wow.
4 hours.
Oh, wow. So that's like one of those experiences that tend to stick with you.
Yeah, but that's just a crazy thing. But it was fun.
Oh, no, and you know what? Crazy or not, it's the kind of again, it's the experience knowing that, you know, at some point you ask yourself, like, why did it take this long? And you start to do the math, and like you said, you had a 28.8 modem, 28.8 baud, as they used
Yeah.
to call it,
Mhm.
and this photo took 4 hours to get downloaded. But these are not very uncommon. I remember even in more recent times, hearing about, this is almost kind of like removed, but I remember hearing stories about people sort of like employed in very non-technical, areas of, you know, sort of like enterprise. Like I remember reading about farmers
Mhm.
and having to work with particular companies, and they had to submit documents, and it was, everyone had like crappy internet.
Mhm.
And this is actually fairly recently in all things considered.
Mhm.
And I remember, watching or reading that report being like, "Oh, man," you know, they are like 10 or 15 years behind, but, for a number of reasons, this was happening with them. And again, it felt very much like what you just described, which was, you know, waiting 4 hours,
Mhm.
waiting overnight. I
Yeah.
remember hearing stories, people waiting overnight for something to download and waking up the next morning and hoping that it was complete. So I could imagine what that's like. But again, these are the kind of, experiences that people remember that can sort of shape, one's career, and I get back to what, I bring him up a lot, but I get back to what Jakob Gross said one day. He said, as a young teenager, not having a lot of money, realizing that friends were having better experiences because they had like, you know, better devices,
Mhm.
and that stuck with him, and it stuck with him to this day, because he makes the argument that is a almost like a civil right. You know, he should be able to have the same experience as someone else. So, but great. That's again a great story. That a 4 hour download for a photo to appear must be interesting. Like I'm curious what his upload took, because, back then, it wasn't that much better.
No,
I'm sure,
I think the problem wasn't with my modem. It was with the service provider who never expected one image to be downloaded 100 times simultaneously.
yeah, absolutely.
Uploading shouldn't have taken that long.
Yeah, yeah, that's very correct. Uh, but, these edge cases aren't edge
Mhm.
cases anymore, you know? So now you've gone, and, throughout the years, through your experiences, through your sort of like acumen, you've been able to sort of like, really work on online and whatnot. You've gone and started this, performance or this page speed agency. Tell me how that came about.
Yeah, how do things happen? I don't know. People keep asking me to help them.
Mhm,
Um, that's basically it. I really like doing it. I think I'm good at it, but uh, it's I do the stuff that I like to do. And I like doing this. And whenever I stop liking it, that's the day I'll stop doing this.
mhm, mhm. Well, I mean, hopefully, in the perfect world, you work on things that you love and you basically stop when you stop loving it, or you can't anymore. But let's, touch on that topic. You helping people out, enjoying helping people, enjoying making, their sites as optimal as possible,
Mm.
uh, and enjoy helping people who are concert pianists,
Yeah.
to get a page up. And, for those who are curious about that last statement,
Mhm.
the original LinkedIn post that I sort of stumbled upon was Arjen talking about helping out a friend really build a personal site uh, and not using a typical stack that people would just almost
Mhm,
lazily reach out to and be like, oh, I need a personal site. Let me use these two items or this one item, this one legacy item. So, like I said, I saw that post and I thought that
mhm.
was very interesting in terms of a conversation. So let's talk about that. So you have a friend who's a pianist.
Mhm. But, he doesn't have a lot of money.
Yeah.
Uh, that's fine. Um, and I was like, "All right, I'll help you. I'll help you build the site." He just wants people to see, to discover him. Um, he's a really good pianist.
Yep.
Um, so I was like, "All right." And the first thing I did, I wanted to check out WordPress, and I didn't like the pricing. And I also didn't want to self-host it because nobody's going to maintain it. I'm not going to maintain it.
Mhm.
Um, I've got a few servers, got a lot of servers actually. Um, but the last time I did that, I ended up removing Bitcoin miners or some other coin. And that was so annoying. So I was like,
Mhm.
"All right, I don't want that.
Right.
I'll have it hosted somewhere else." I was looking at WordPress. Don't particularly like WordPress. Don't get me wrong. It has a lot of good use cases, but it's just a very personal thing. I don't like
Mhm.
the plugins. There's a lot of things I don't really like. Maybe that's because of my work, because people keep messing it up. Um,
So here's a quick question
yeah,
before we go further. And I was actually going to say that because I wanted to know if some of your selections, your picks,
yeah.
because you're very sort of intentional in sort of sharing what you wanted to
Mhm.
work on. You'd mentioned at some point that WordPress, and like you said right there, you weren't really a fan of like the plugin ecosystem, and people have talked about that in the past. Now, is this are some of your decisions with regards to building this pianist's personal site, were they also sort of like based upon what you had seen and learned by as being a performance consultant?
Yeah, sure. I think whenever you get the chance, and I know you don't often get the chance because there's other forces. Um, but whenever you get the chance, you should get a site that does what you need it to do. That's what makes it fast. If it can do 1,000 things, it needs to support 1,000 things. It's always going to be some sort of slow. I'm not saying Next.js is fast. It's not. But if you build something on any platform, basically any modern platform, um, and make it do what it's supposed to do, it's going to be fast. Um, so I didn't really care that much about which platform I used. Um, I wanted it to be really cheap.
Hmm.
I wanted it to be really easy.
Hmm.
Uh, I do a lot of Next.js and React consultancy.
Hmm.
So I think I know almost everything there's to know these days.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that makes it really easy for me to build a website in Next.js.
Hmm.
So that's why that one um, was my final choice. So Next.js, Versal, I like Versal. The payload, um, CMS, which is really really nice.
Mhm,
You can kind of configure your own pages.
mhm,
You can then just add some configuration and say, well, I want a page and I want this. Type of content, want that type of content, so text and image and whatever, and that's really easy to build. So I can build a couple of templates for them very easily, um, which just do what they're supposed to do. So for his calendar, he can add future calendar dates with some links and some YouTube videos and whatnot. And for his personal pages, he can just write text and place them wherever he wants.
mhm,
Uh, and within 10 minutes, I'll make the next template for him if he wants something else.
mhm, mhm,
That's the kind of stuff I'm looking for. This also has great support for ISR,
mhm,
static regeneration. So that basically means you get a static page first.
mhm,
So the page has already been rendered, doesn't have to be rendered on the fly, and that's going to be really really fast. Then Next.js will kick in. It will hydrate. There's some slowness in there, uh, and that's why. It's always some sort of slow Next.js, but it's fast enough.
Mhm,
You know what you're doing. Uh, if you don't, if you handle your images correctly, make it static, um, configure your fonts.
mhm.
That always goes wrong in Next.js. And don't do too much stuff. If you've analytics, do it after hydration. That's going to be really fast.
Mhm, mhm. So I'm gonna step back for a quick second because you definitely kind of ran through, parts of your post that really sort of caught my attention. But let's go back and talk about, WordPress for a quick second,
Sure.
because there's always this conversation around, say, WordPress not being fast enough.
Yeah.
There's always a conversation, or even I remember, and I've sort of quoted this a bit in more recent times. There was
Mhm.
this article by the founder. I believe he's Dutch. On top of that, the
Yeah.
founder of Yoast,
Yeah.
um, the WordPress ecosystem and community specifically was not being sort of intentional enough at modernizing their processes, their stacks, et cetera, et cetera. Basically saying like, WordPress was not modern enough. And he was urging the community to sort of make that their priority to make sure that they were kind of like keeping up with standards and whatnot. And that's also been talked about in the performance side. And I know they have that core team. Shout outs to Weston Ruder, who's on the core performance team, who's been doing fantastic work over there. So that being said, would you agree with that assertion that, WordPress generally has not been sort of like up to speed, if you want to call it that?
No, no, no,
Okay.
no. I don't think so. So I've played around with WordPress a lot, and if you configure a decent server, doesn't it? You can get the cheapest server there is.
Mhm,
Do it correctly, bare bone. Configure WordPress. That's gonna be pretty fast, even
mhm,
with web caching. So that's not a problem per se. So the plugins, I get it.
mhm,
You need it.
mhm,
Um, what I don't like about WordPress is the amount of what people tend to believe. Just a few days ago, I heard, well, all you have to do is configure WP Rocket, um, and then it's done.
mhm,
I really hate that. 'Cause that's absolutely not how it's supposed to work.
mhm,
So caching plugin, fine. I get it. I don't like the way WP plug Rocket works
mhm,
with their delayed JavaScript and all their nasty tricks to make it seem like the page is fast.
mhm,
Um, but here's the thing. Um, I told you I was doing SEO, and then the marketeers came. And they kind of convinced the world, no, no, it's not technical. Of course, it's technical. Google is super technical. It's only technical when it comes down to it. And that's the same um, with this. There's too many people uh, saying really interesting stuff. Now you have to do this, you have to do this, and it's such bad advice. And I think I've noticed that most of the people with a very slow WordPress website,
mhm,
we have no idea how they got there. Yeah, we just did this and we just did that because everybody keeps telling you have to do this and that. And then you explain why it's such a bad idea. And we're like, we didn't know.
mhm,
No, that's right. Because, everybody says, oh, you just have to do WP Rocket. Oh, you can delay your JavaScript. That's a really good idea because you get a super lighthouse score.
mhm,
And then you have to start explaining to them, well, that's not what matters. That's not how it works. And, I kind of blame those people because they just accepted it. But it's not in bad faith.
right.
So it's very difficult. And I think if you have the most popular, or at least had, I don't know the numbers these days. Yeah, this stuff is bound to happen. There's a lot of money involved. But yeah, and on the other hand, you're also correct with what you said today. They haven't been the first one to renew, and they made some questionable choices about how they perceive page speed. I read a blog post, I think 3 weeks ago, about one about a WordPress performance engineer, one of the core team, and he was like, "All right, we implemented this because Lighthouse says it's faster." No, they still think that Lighthouse is the only source of truth. Um, and maybe, in a perfect world, there's some truth to that, but it's just not how it works.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, I've said this before, and I don't think, WordPress is the only community that has sort of not understood performance as well as they could. But I've always said that there's a
Mhm.
little bit of literacy challenge, and that's, you can almost, sort of pick the community and sort of make that discovery. And speaking of discovery, and we just talked about WordPress. Now,
Yeah.
you specifically said you were not going to go with WordPress. You had your own, um, you made your own decision around that, but you also made the decision to use Next.js. And
Sure.
again, Next.js, the public face of Next.js will tell you
Mhm.
about Next.js being, lightning fast. I know Guillermo, he's very adamant about performance. You
Mhm.
know, I know Malti,
Mhm.
legend in the performance side. Uh,
Mhm.
but just generally, there's, evidence out there that, the Next.js sites that are published
Yeah.
are often not the fastest either. So again, explain why you picked Next.js and why you believe it's still fast.
Right. Yeah. I think I mentioned that. You can make every modern CMS fast. That's not a problem. I always say, you build it, I'll make it fast. That's not a problem these days.
Mhm,
Um, so yeah, if you start building a Next.js site, one of two things usually happens. One, you got sold. No, I get the question. Well, we want to go headless, and this company is going to build a Next.js site for us. Is that going to be fast? They say it's going to be fast. I'm like, probably not. So that's one. And the other
mhm,
is you're going to have a really complicated site. You know, a lot of Next.js choose Next.js because they have to work on it with a team of developers, and they have a lot of APIs they should call, and there's just so much happening.
mhm,
So that's a totally different branch of sites than your average WordPress site,
mhm.
or, where you talk about, I don't know, how fast you can run or something. You know.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's not really um, a page speed consideration. The consideration is it gonna be fast enough? Do I have the tools to make it fast? I
Mhm,
do. So
mhm.
that's fine. One of the No, I was just going in my head. All right, I don't want to start removing crypto miners again. That's what on the top of my head. I could have done another CMS. Let me show you because you want me to show you.
Oh, please, by all means.
Yeah. So I'm not going to show you this pianist site
Okay.
because I don't ever talk about my clients um, by name, but I made a new site just before. Uh, so this
Mhm.
is payload. So this is your back end and this is your front end. This is kind of how it works. You got your users, you got your media, you got your pages, you got your header, you got your footer. I just made a new page, which is
Mhm,
called ASD, ASD, ASD.
mhm,
Now I added two columns in there. One with some content. This is just a test with a spelling error. Don't care. One with a screenshot. This is the complete blank. There's no template here whatsoever. This
mhm,
is just your starting point. And the cool thing is, you can add um, all sorts of content in here.
mhm,
So add a column block, and then you can choose rich text or media. And there's I think there's about 20 predefined um, types of column blocks. Um, and you can just make it really foolproof for the people who work with that, and that's one of the other things that I found really interesting. um I talked with this guy. He wants some pictures, he wants his agenda, his calendar, he wants a contact form, and that's basically it. So that's all I built. No way for him to mess it up.
got it. And
And this
so no, go ahead, please.
me show you this. This is cool. So this is the actual run data for the site for the pianist.
Mhm.
So um, true, it's a lot of me, it's a lot of him, but there's also some other traffic. It's mostly Dutch, so we have a really nice connection here. Uh, but for mobile, you know, 172 milliseconds for the LCP, 12 milliseconds IMP, no layout shift. That's good enough for me.
Absolutely. As you mentioned, it is a Dutch audience, so there's
Mhm.
that sort of like advantage to an extent.
Yeah,
And uh, yeah, absolutely. You know, when you stay within your environment, things tend to be optimal. Now with regards to again some of your selections that you'd mentioned in your sort of LinkedIn post that you
Mhm.
also were intentional in having only like two fonts,
Yeah.
and that was also part of your sort of like decisions, in making the site as fast as possible within the constraints that, he
Yeah.
may have sort of, because did you design the site or did he provide an idea of a design that he wanted?
No, I did. I did.
Okay, cool, cool,
But
cool.
this is kind of my global rule. 2 fonts max. You
Mhm,
can use a bit more, but you
mhm,
can have 2 early, visible fonts.
mhm.
Um, I think, with what's it called? Not the dynamic fonts, but the fonts that harbor.
Variables?
Yeah, variable fonts.
Mhm,
Um, that's pretty acceptable. You got font that's synthesis, font synthesis. I don't know how you pronounce it,
mhm,
which is also good enough. If you have the 400, the browser will mimic the bold, etc. Um, you can do a whole lot with 2 fonts, and if you want to late load some other stuff, that's fine. 2 fonts, one LCP element, one style sheet preferably, but at least keep it below 15 kilobytes.
mhm,
Now, if you do that, make sure your LCP image is discoverable. Short time to first byte.
mhm.
Problem solved.
Yeah, yeah. So I'll say this much, and I'm also going to ask you.
Mhm,
We've especially in the performance community, we've always sort of like wondered, or at least we've always advised people
mhm,
that they don't need to throw a big giant truck for something that really needs like a small vehicle to complete a task. And, what I essentially mean is that quite often enough, people will go out and, grab this massive framework that everyone has been talking about because it's so amazing. And then
mhm,
they want a personal site out of it. And it
mhm,
becomes like massive kind of like bloatware, if you want to call it that.
mhm,
Uh, and again, getting back to your experience as a consultant, I'm sure a lot of your decisions, if not all of them,
mhm.
must be based on your travels, working with clients, and seeing some of that same kind of mental belief that if I use this framework or if I use this kind of stack, it's going to solve my small problem.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot of times. If we just do this, it will solve our problems. But no, you can make anything slow, and you can make almost anything fast.
Mhm.
Uh, I've yesterday, I don't know if you saw my LinkedIn post. I saw a site that was actually downloading 326 scripts, and it was
Mm.
still faster than most other sites.
And it was faster than most
Just
of.
faster, yeah. And it's all about timing. It's all about timing. If your page is rendered, your images and your core functionality is there. Uh, and you slowly load those scripts. I have no idea why they did it. I'm not saying it's a good idea, uh, but I'm saying page speed um, is attainable regardless, of the CMS that you use.
Mhm. So in this example, we're basically saying that even though they may have had uh, over 300 scripts downloaded, they
Mm.
still they still prioritize the critical rendering path.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
things loaded up quickly, but they still loaded up 300
Yeah,
scripts.
and they yielded a lot, and they did some fun stuff. It was still a very bad idea. But don't get me wrong. If anybody asks, "Hey, Arjen, I want to build a site. Should I use your stack?" Probably not. That's a really bad idea, unless you know what you're doing. But if
Mhm.
you know Next.js, if you know how to configure it to be fast, that
Mhm.
it's a pretty good idea, because it's fun.
Mm.
I think it's fun. It's really cheap, which is nice. Because I'm a Dutch guy, which I really like it. I like my choice. I actually started a few other sites for some other people as well. In this framework, basically, it's easy and they cannot really mess it up, and I kind of like that.
Mhm. Mhm. This has been discussed obviously in the last like 2, 3 weeks, month or so, whatnot.
Mhm.
I know someone has been sort of like planning, maybe even a blog post around this, but the idea, especially now that we have this new community of people able to publish to the internet, and whether it be little web apps or just a page, without really knowing what's going on under the hood. And I'm my belief is going to be this surge of relatively slow sites that people will maybe not be able to debug because they're actually unaware of what is actually going on in the
Mhm.
engineering.
That's gonna be a problem, but that's already a problem.
Mm,
You know, um, most of the younger people I know and work with, they haven't grown up, um, so they don't know how a network request works.
mm,
It's just there. If they need a solution, they'll get a package, and they're used to very fast machines, and that's not per se a bad thing. I don't know. I
mhm,
don't have too much of an opinion about that, but
yeah.
it's. I do see that it's very hard, to debug,
Mhm,
figure out problems if you don't know how it works on the lower end.
mhm, mhm.
But yeah,
And no, go ahead, please.
no, I was agreeing with you.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, maybe AI is smart enough to make some fast stuff. No, it's pretty smart.
Mm,
I asked Gemini to build most of the templates for it. Why should I? But I know which questions I should ask him. I want this, I want that, I want you to do it like that. I don't have to code it myself. That's fine. But if you say, build me a nice template, it's gonna do a whole lot of weird stuff.
indeed, and that will be something worth paying attention to and watching as time progresses. Um, and I know that also for your pianist's site,
Mhm.
you also incorporated, I believe, one of your services from the work that you do.
Yeah,
Did you want to talk about that?
sure. Yeah, Kodesh. There's it's a RAM tool. It's the same RAM tool as all the others. It just uses the Web Vitals library.
Mhm,
There's two things different. One, it does exactly what I need it to do, and
mhm,
that's the most important thing for me. Um, you know, I work for a lot of really large sites, and they have a lot of specific problems, and I want to be able to figure out where things go wrong. So I need all the information that I want to have. So I built Cordash. Basically, for me, it's a ROM tool that does exactly what I needed to do.
mhm.
Secondly, I didn't like um, the other ROM tools pricings. They're great.
Okay.
They're great. They may be better than mine. In some cases they're not. That's my opinion. But I don't like. I think most of them are hosted in some Google Cloud or whatever, and it's going to be expensive real fast.
Right.
So I thought, well, I can make this a lot more efficient. That's what I do. I make stuff efficient. So I did. And that's why it's a lot cheaper for me than all the other tools.
Right.
And
Right.
if you want to, Now other people can get a subscription as well.
Nice, nice. And so through you have this rum tool
Yeah.
that you obviously use with clients,
Mhm.
uh, the numerous clients, by the way. And again, I'm not going to name them either,
Mhm.
but they are available to see on your published business page.
Small selection of them, yeah.
Oh, okay. There's a lot more. He says, folks. There's a
Mm,
lot more.
yeah.
I mean, that's good. And like, even before wrapping up, when do you have a particular client that came to see you or you came to see them, but, when the agreement was made that you were going to work together,
Yeah.
is there a particular client that, after the meeting, you just went home and just jumped for joy, you screamed and, you gave your wife a big hug, we're getting a new computer. I don't know.
Yeah, I bought my kids the Nintendo Switch this last week
Okay.
because of this. So I have a really, really, really big client coming up. Um, they live relatively close to you.
Okay.
They broadcast a lot of stuff uh, on television and on the internet. And that's all I'm gonna say.
Okay, but but that's a recent one. So I could, and by the way, congratulations. And I could appreciate, having those sort of like recurring, like big, meetings and, great contracts being signed.
Mm,
But do you remember the first one that really made you like jump for joy? And how long ago was it? Because I know you're not going to mention their names, but you
yeah.
know,
Oh, I'll turn it around a bit because I'm not the guy who jumps for joy. I don't know why. My wife always complains, "Oh, you should show more emotion," and I'm like, "Yeah, I don't.
okay.
Yeah, that's just me. Sorry." Um, but I do really like um, having the interesting clients. So, that one site that all the guys never visit. Yeah, that one.
Okay.
That was fun.
Okay.
That was a lot of fun because it's just totally different.
Hmm.
Um, the culture is different. The way they work is so different. Um, and especially 10 years ago, when things were less corporate. I remember, having meetings with these guys on the beach with their laptop and having sites worth millions or billions. I don't know, and I really like that. I like talking to them, and these people they don't take the path that's normalized. They just do their own thing, and they grow really big, and that's cool.
That's awesome. So, kind of like in summary today, and this is something that I've always sort of like shared as well, but I don't think people do spend the time to really sort of like fine tooth and comb through, a code base and making sure things are like as lean as possible. But between two platforms that have been often sort of like called out to not be the fastest,
Mhm,
WordPress and Next.js, you
mhm,
know, a few of us knew, but yourself, you've been adamant in sort of sharing that you just have to know how to tune the platform correctly.
mhm.
You
That's right.
know, like that's the bottom line. Like you can make almost anything pretty fast, but
Mhm,
you have to spend the time to tune it right so that you're not using uh, a Austin Mini to go do a bunch of groceries. Just like you don't need like a big van to deliver like one letter of mail. You know what I mean? Like,
No,
and, and
that's fun because I tell the exact same story about the car analogy because that's so true. Yeah.
And that's it. I think that a lot of people do not spend the time to use the tooling that is required
Mhm.
for, the limitations there. I don't know if there's something that you said today or someone said this recently, but getting back to the idea of just like having this little budget. It's like, here's the quote unquote performance budget that's been talked about in the past.
That's the entire problem.
Mm.
You know, I work for a lot of large companies, so it's different than smaller ones.
Mhm.
Uh, you know, what I usually find is, people will get tasks,
Mhm.
and they have to perform them within a certain amount of time,
Mhm.
within these constraints. And they do. And if they don't, they get, well, why aren't you? So they only do what's required of them. I want you to build this filter component. I want you to do that. I want you to do that. And nobody ever says, well, I want you to learn page speed. Take a month, learn it. Um, and that's part of the problem.
Yeah. No.
And they want to. That's the cool thing, because usually when I get there on day one, they'll be like a bit hostile. Who's this asshole? Can I say that? I did it anyway. Um, and then I start explaining and start telling. They will become really enthusiastic, and then that's where the magic happens. Because when I leave somewhere, I want people to stand on their own feet,
Mhm.
uh, and just keep making it faster and faster and faster.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, that's good. And like you said, having this sort of like education background, wanting to see people, better themselves, wanting to see people create better products in,
Mhm.
what they deploy to the internet, and making sure it's fast as possible, because that is what you specialize in as a consultancy. And, with the years of experience, having seen so many clients along the way. So, no, that's certainly an awesome feeling, knowing that people sort of like respond and really have these aha moments like, "Oh, I get it now. This is why we do this X, Y, and Z. This
It's
is why these APIs are important." So, awesome, awesome. Man, Arjen, man, thank you. This
You're
has
welcome.
been like, and this is exactly what the discussion I was hoping to have, because again, I know WordPress can be fast, but often enough people don't make the time for it. I know Next.js can be fast, but again, often enough people don't make the time for it. I'll give you another example. I was listening to a podcast recently, with the people at Syntax FM, so Wes Boss and Scott,
Mhm.
and we were talking about the fact that, oh no, this one was with Wes only, and they were talking about the fact that there came a point where all websites look the same. And I was saying this a long time ago, because when people used to trash Bootstrap,
Yeah.
and I was like, Bootstrap is not the problem. It's people who just use the default
Mhm.
setting
Yeah.
and just then take off. They're like,
Mhm.
"Oh, we're good now."
Yeah.
And that happened with Bootstrap, and that was happening with Tailwind as well.
Mhm.
People were not fine tuning, the sort of set of tools they were provided, and they're like, "Yeah, I'm just gonna dump it in here, couple words here, I'll change the colors, and I'm good." And everything did start to look the same.
Mhm.
So Next.js, WordPress, I think they're all victims to that as well,
Yeah.
and it's not that they can't be fast, it's that the people using them aren't tweaking them to make them fast. So that's amazing. So, in sort of summary,
Mhm.
um, again, we've talked about it. This episode has been about the idea of making sure you tweak, making sure you have performance budgets, and uh, not put too much sugar on your. How do you call it? What's that? That sort of like nice little yummy candy bread thing in Dutch and Netherlands, strufels or whatever. I don't know.
Stroopwafel. Yeah.
Yeah,
Did you put sugar on the stroopwafel? No, man.
I don't know what it.
Did
That
they
thing's
tell
sweet.
you? They got you good.
That thing is sweet. I just know I've had it at birth. Now I'm like, I cannot have more than 2,
No.
because I think I'll die. But it's like, yeah, not too much sugar on those, please. Um, so Aryan, man, listen, um, people have been watching, they're interested in the consultancy, they're interested in getting in touch with you. How do they get in touch with you?
They go to my website, corewebfighters.io, or my LinkedIn, and they say, "Hey, Arjen," and that's when we start talking.
Okay. Awesome, awesome. Well, I'll make sure to include that in the show notes. I'll actually include the link to this this LinkedIn post in the show notes, so that people can kind of like see it and, kind of wrap their heads around the idea. But, I do believe, I think, in fact, Vercel and Next.js, they're creating this sort of like, how to tweak performance page. I don't know. I
Mhm.
got to double check. I thought I saw that. and it kind of caught my attention. So,
Yeah.
but that being said, sir, I do want to thank you for your time. Again, it is the evening in the Netherlands. Uh, if you don't mind me asking, what city are you in?
Bergen op Zoom, near the Belgian border.
Okay, cool, cool, cool. But I know it's all Central European time, so it's still late.
It's
But it,
8 o'clock.
okay, well, again, I do want to thank you for your time tonight. What was that?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I mean, I wanted to say, but you talk a lot.
Oh, no, 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 listen, I was like, yeah,
I wanted to say that it's really, really nice that you're doing this. I watch from time to time. I don't have a lot of time, but it's always really
appreciate that.
interesting. So if you get a chance, people look at this podcast.
Oh, thank you, thank you. I do appreciate that.